Bonjour. Alors, nous sommes maintenant chapitre 3. We are now in chapter 3. The first part of chapter 3 blends nicely with your attention to cultural paper 1 and followed by cultural paper 2 in these last 2 weeks. The first theme that you see is that of countries. As you look at this map, though, you'll see that it could be a bit overwhelming to make this chapter about memorizing the French word for all of the countries in the world, let alone focusing on one very dense continent like Africa or Europe, where you have a lot of smaller countries. So our approach will not be necessarily memorizing the entire world map in French, but perhaps just focusing on learning the handful of countries that the book proposes to you, or if you want, you could focus on la Francophonie, the countries that are part of the Francophone map, and just focusing on a handful of countries, learning, for example, which ones are French and feminine, which ones in French are masculine, and which ones are always plural. Hint, hint, our own country, les États-Unis d'Amérique, is always plural. The United States, S. Les États-Unis d'Amérique. As opposed to United Kingdom, which is obviously United Kingdom, one kingdom, Royaume-Uni, or l'Angleterre. L'Angleterre, by the way, for England, l'Angleterre, l'Irlande, l'Écosse, those are all feminine in the individual country names. So you start learning maybe Le Canada, that's a major one. Le Canada, masculine. Le Mexique, masculine. Le Brésil, masculine. And then you look over here, a lot of the countries over on this side that stick out. La Russie is feminine. La Chine is feminine. La France, l'Espagne, even l'Allemagne, l'Ukraine, la Roumanie, la Bulgarie, l'Algérie, la Libye. These are all feminine. So what you will be learning in this chapter is to at least make intelligent guesses. I think this one's feminine. It has that I sound at the end, or an E, like la Finlande, la Norvège, la Suède, l'Estonie. I believe those are feminine. And then, le Canada, le Mexique, le Brésil is masculine. And as you get that ball rolling, you start to open up to the ability to talk using verbs like être, or using verbs like venir. That's a new verb, irregular verb proposed to you in the first grammar lesson. Venir, to come from. And as you start saying, voilà, je suis, you want to say I am in the United States, or I am from the United States, then pulling in our preposition. À, de, at, from, à, in, de, from. Sometimes if you're saying je vais à Paris, I'm going to Paris. But if you're saying j'habite à Paris, or je suis à Paris, that would translate into English, I am in Paris, or I live in Paris. Whereas de is usually from. J'arrive de Paris. Je suis de Paris. Or elle vient de Paris. She comes from Paris. So the verbs we use, aller, to go to or from, venir, to come from, or être, je suis, I am, in or at. And as we start building momentum, so we're learning the different countries and we're learning to use verbs like I'm coming from or I'm going to or I am, then we have to just fine-tune our use of the preposition a little further, because when you're using a preposition a for a city, that's pretty straightforward. But when you're using the preposition a to go to a country, well, if it's a feminine country, you don't say à la, as you would for a place in the city, like à la mairie, or à la. You say en. Yes, that en or en makes it on. Je vais en France. Je vais en Russie, for a feminine. Whereas if I'm going to a masculine country, I do the contraction that you learned about. A plus LE becomes O, yes. So, le restaurant would become au restaurant. Well, the same thing for Canada. Je vais au Canada. Je vais au Brésil. Je vais au Mali. Or au Chad. I've just been saying I'm going to these masculine countries. Now, if you think it through, it feels kind of painful. But as you practice it, it just becomes part of your toolbox. Being able to speak in French, that language which is beautiful because of its play between masculine and feminine sounds. Il est au Canada. He is in Canada. Elle est en Russie. She is in Russia. Lui, he, il est en Chine. Il vient de Chine. Elle est au Canada. Elle vient du Canada. Now, when we're talking about coming from a place, if it's masculine, it's du. So that's a nice kind of matchup. Elle est au Canada. Elle est ou elle vient du Canada. She is in, she is from. So I'm using au, a, u, or from, du. Au Kazakhstan, from, du Kazakhstan. Whereas for the feminine country, like la Chine, elle est en Chine, she's in China, and now I want to say she comes from China, elle est de Chine, ou elle vient de Chine. So for the masculine, it's au, o, and then from, du. For the feminine, it's en France, en Chine, en Inde, en Bolivie, en Irlande. But from, it's just de, de, or d apostrophe, for a country that begins with a vowel, d'Irlande, de Colombie. Voila. You have a chart in your book. Isn't this a beautiful map? It's not very helpful to you because in chapter 3, what you are focusing on is practicing those prepositions as you practice speaking about a world using the French words for countries. And those French words for countries are either masculine or feminine. You'll also be, once again, practicing adjectives because with the nationality, you also have an adjective. If someone says, j'habite aux États-Unis, then they're going to say, je suis, and they're going to use American as an adjective. Je suis américain for a man. Je suis américaine for a woman. Or if someone's in French, je suis français for a man. Elle est française for a woman. Il est espagnol for a man. Elle est espagnole, with adding an E, for a woman. So, and the last point I want to make is for these plural places, like the Emirates, or the United States, or the Netherlands. You use, it sounds like a masculine, AOX, actually it's AOX, aux États-Unis, aux Pays-Bas, aux Émirats, and then DES is the, je suis des, voilà, il arrive des États-Unis, elle est des États-Unis. So you'll be once again practicing adjectives, using the different ways of saying elle est américaine, or c'est une femme américaine, ou c'est une américaine. And you'll be practicing the prepositions on I Learn This Week. Bon courage!